let's say a few words about Parshas Nasso. The Parsha has many different dimensions to it and many different mitzvos. Amongst them, the mitzvah of Nazir, and there's an entire Masechta in Shas dedicated to the mitzvah of Nazir. Now, this mitzvah of Nazir is very complex. And you could learn the entire Masechta and still be confused by it. The most confusing dimension to Nezirus is the fact that on the one hand, the Torah calls the Nazir Kadosh. What does that sound like to you? Is that thumbs up or thumbs down? Is Nezirus a good thing or a bad thing?
It sounds good.
Sounds like a good thing. The Nazir is called Kadosh. But on the other hand, just to confuse us, the Torah says that the Nazir has to bring a korban. And of all the korbanos that he has to bring, it's a chatos, which is a sin offering. So how can you call him a kadosh and insist that he reached a high level of sanctity, which is a great thing? That's what the Torah says, kadoshim tiyu. And at the same time, out of the same breath, the Torah says, let him bring a korban chatos. So it's almost as if the Torah is saying that, yes, you should strive for Kedusha, but up to a certain level, up to a certain point. Don't go overboard with it. And you may recall that in the case of Nadav Avihu, the sons of Aaron, they seem to have gone overboard in their tremendous, profound desire for reaching higher levels, and they ended up bringing an Eish Zorah Shalotziva Hashem. So that within the context of Kedusha, of sanctity, we should differentiate between a chiyuv, a situation in which the Torah requires you to be a kadosh, as opposed to taking upon yourself levels of Kedusha which may or may not really belong to you. Now, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, in this shmooze, in this sikha, puts a tremendous focus on the Rambam. And I'd like to explain why. The Rambam dedicates over 10 chapters to the laws of Nezirus. That's way, way beyond the average for the Rambam. And towards the very end of Hilchos Nezirus, he seems to touch on this question as to whether or not we should give brownie points to a Nazir, or maybe he did not do the right thing. The Rambam says that Nezirus is on the one hand called Nidrei Rishoyim. Wow, that's a heavy phrase. I don't know if you see that on the second line. But on the other hand, the Rambam says, Hanoder Lashem Derek Kedusha, if he does it in the right way, for the right purposes, in order to strive for higher levels of Kedusha, Hareze Noah u'Meshubach. So look at the two extremes here. On one extreme, the Rambam calls, Nezirus is a kind of a neder. He classifies it as Nidrei Rishayim. On the other hand, he says, Hareze Noah u'Meshubach. So the same paradox that we raised on the Torah, we're going to raise on the Rambam. But the Rambam adds the following sentence. And it's all based on a Gemara. He says, Hari Nemar Bo, regarding the Nazir, it says, Nezer Elokav al Rosho Kadosh Hu Lashem. The Torah gives we'll call it an accolade to the Nazir and calls him Kadosh Lashem, Ushkolo Akasu bin Navi, and the Torah compares him to the great level of a Navi. And the Rambam quotes a pasuk to prove that. So it seems from the Rambam that if he's motivated by the right reasons, and he has a serious fear that maybe if he drinks too much wine, or he might grow his hair very long. With again, you and I might have debates whether that's a good-looking thing to comely to grow your hair long or not. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of very long hair, but it seems like back in the day it was attractive. So this is called Nezirus Hamiskaven L'Shem Shomayim L'Hiskaber Al Yitro. When a person sees that the Yetzer Hara is getting the best of him, let's say in contemporary terms, we might say he hangs out in parties. I don't know if any of you are planning to go to secular universities. If you are, you got to watch out for two things. Number one, Hamas. And number two, for these parties, they call them wine and cheese parties, I don't know if hopefully you never heard of such a thing, but just in case you do, those are places you want to stay far away from. So, in a certain sense, a person finds himself, and by the way, Nezirus applies to a woman as well, if she accepts upon herself Nezirus. A lot of people make a mistake about that. He finds himself in a situation where the Yetzer Hara is really getting the best of him. He's surrounded by an atmosphere of, let's put all the emphasis on this world, forget about the next world. Let's enjoy, eat, drink, and be merry, and especially drink wine and be merry for tomorrow. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. The Yetzer Hara has a way of working on a person. And he chips away, piece by piece until he finally gets you really down. So the Rambam quotes, perhaps not explicitly, but implicitly, a Gemara about Shimon HaTzadik. Now let's understand that Shimon HaTzadik, who is one of the greatest of our Tanoim, refused to eat from the korban of a Nazir until one situation arose. Why? Why did Reb Shimon HaTzadik avoid eating from the basar achatos, which the Kohanim eat, of a Nazir? So the Gemara assumes that according to Shimon HaTzadik, a Nazir is not l'shem shamayim. He's not doing it for the right reasons. He's kind of like going beyond himself and boasting, well, I'm a Nazir, people respect me. Oh, by the way, I always have to ask you the question, did you ever see a Nazir?
No, I know there's people who took a vow in Nezirus like today, that's right. There's Nezirus, like modern day Nezirus, that's right.
No, well, I saw a Nazir. I once saw a Nazir when I was your age. In fact, when the Nazir lost one of his close relatives, I went to be Menachem the Nazir, Nichum Avelim.
Isn't a Nazir not supposed to leave Eretz Yisrael?
Well, the thing is like this. Today, a Nazir is called a Nazir Tumah. In other words, he only has 2 Isurim and not the third. A Nazir today would not be allowed to cut his hair and would not would not be allowed to drink wine. But the laws of Tumah V'Tara, I don't believe would apply to a Nazir today, because we're all pretty much bechezkas tmein. But for that, you have to know a lot more about Nezirus. Okay, now, excuse me. Under the premise that the Nazir, as a general rule, is not accepting Nezirus l'shem shamayim for the right reasons, Shimon HaTzadik did not want to in any way participate in the ceremony of a Nazir and partake of the karmachatos that the Nazir brings at the end, at the termination of his Nazirus. However, there was a Nazir achas min hadaram. Now, again, I don't know why the Gemara is so careful about telling you that he came from the south. Maybe the Gemara wants to indicate that this is a true story, so it gives you more of the details. And Shimon HaTzadik is going to eat from his chatos nazir. And apparently Shimon HaTzadik was absolutely convinced that this particular nazir min hadarom accepted upon himself Nezirus for the right reasons, what we call l'shem shamayim, meaning he was absolutely justified in accepting upon himself Nezirus. Now, let me ask you a question before we go on. Does a Nazir grow his hair or cut his hair?
Grow his hair.
I'll give you three choices. A, he grows his hair. B, he cuts his hair. C, both.
Both.
Excellent, both. C, because he grows his hair during Nezirus, but he has to shave his hair at the end of his Nezirus. And there's a whole ceremony where he takes the hair that he shaves and he burns it under the fire of the Mizbeach. That's a whole complicated sugya unto itself. So this Shimon HaTzadik meets this Nazir min hadarom. Ra'isiv, he testifies that I saw him shu yefei einayim v'tov ro'i. He's a very nice-looking fellow, beautiful eyes, very beautiful appearance. Uktosov sturos taltalim. He's got beautiful curls on his hair. Again, all this, to me, in contemporary world sounds very feminine and unattractive, but back in the day, and maybe it's coming back into style today, I don't know, men who had beautiful long hair in curls were considered even more attractive. Omarti lo, when this Nazir came, Shimon HaTzadik testifies that I asked him the following question: Bini, my son, Mara iso lahashchis es sarecha zehano. Why did you feel compelled to accept Nezirus, and now you're going to have to shave your head and cut off all this beautiful hair that's got taltalim? Omar li, he responded, Roa hayisi li abba be'iri. I was a shepherd in my father's town. Halachti lamalos mayim min hamayim. I went out to the spring, to the well, in order to draw water to feed the animals, the sheep. Nistakalti b'abu shali. They didn't have mirrors in those days. So it was the first time that he looked into the reflection in the water and he saw himself. Anybody remember another case of someone who all of a sudden realized what?
Avram noticed Sarah.
Excellent. Sarah, right. So sometimes you look into a pond of clear, crystal clear water and you see a mirror image of yourself. So all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, again, this sounds very strange, I realized, hey, I'm a hotshot. I'm a really good-looking guy. The women are going to be after me. You know what I mean? Upachas alai yitzri. And at that very moment, I felt that the Yetzer Hara was grabbing me, was getting the best of me. Ubikesh l'tarduni min ha'olam. I'd like you to underline that phrase. It's a phrase that appears over and over again throughout Chazal. When the Yetzer Hara decides he's got a great victim, and I'm going to be torrid him, I'm going to rip him out of this world. Which world is he referring to?
Oh,
in other words, this guy's a great catch. It's the right moment to set this guy off and force him to forfeit his olam haba. Because now he sees what a good-looking guy he is. What's he going to go and do? He's going to show up at all the parties, and he's going to, pardon the expression, pick up the maidluch, the girls, and that's it. He's going to give up his world to come. And it's unbelievable. All the Yetzer Hara needed in order to identify its victim was simply that this fellow, Min Adoram, looked into a mirror. That's all it took. Yeah, why do I emphasize that? The Bali Musar always teach us how careful you have to be with every step you take. And, you look into a mirror, big deal. I mean, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but how many of us here in the room actually look into a mirror from time to time, if not from morning to evening, every day? So I have a mirror in my tefillin because otherwise my tefillin don't stay in the right place. But the truth is, I walk into an elevator here in Ramat Beit Shemesh, Neve Shamir, 25 Klein. If anyone wants to come visit me, please come for a meal on Shabbos. Anyway, so I walk into the elevator. What do I see? A gigantic mirror. So I almost have no choice. Okay, but at my age, I'm not such a victim, a catch for the Yetzer Hara. But this young man was probably, I'm guessing, 16, 17. Maybe he was 20, 21, 22 years old. And one little move, he looked into a reflection of his face, and the Yetzer Hara says, I got him. He's in my clutches. Amarti lo. So this young man carries on a conversation with the Yetzer Hara. Again, it doesn't mean that he was loco moco, and he's talking, to a non-existent being. It means he's talking to himself, because the Yetzer Hara has penetrated into himself and has tempted him to want to utilize his good looks for the wrong things. Why are you so full of yourself with your good looks in a world that doesn't belong to you? What does that mean when he says the world doesn't belong to me? We have two worlds. We have this world and the next. Which world is really ours, really mine?
Olam haba.
How do you know that? Can you prove that to me?
Everything we do is so we can get a spot in Olam Haba.
Excellent. And which is permanent and which is temporary and fleeting?
Olam Haba is permanent and Olam Haba is temporary.
Correct. Olam Haba is eternal. Olam Hazeh, you're here today, and I hate to say it, gone tomorrow, and the worms crawl in and the worms crawl out. Mishu asid lios rima v'tolea. This world that you want to take me out of this world, but basically you want to take me out of the next world. Okay, but this world, what am I going to do? I'm going to enjoy myself in this world, eat, drink, and marry, because tomorrow you'll be dead. What's the point? This world is not really mine. I'm passing through this world like a ship that passes through one country and one island and another island. It's just a long mirage. It's a fake. It's not real. What do you have to show for yourself? Oh, you're beautiful. You're good looking. You got these curly hairs, right? Where's it all going to go? It's going to go to the worms? Ha'uvda, avodah is a lashon shvua. He takes an oath. Shagalelchecha lashamayim. I'm going to take upon myself Nezirus, and I'm going to cut off the hair as part of the mitzvah of Nezirus, Lashamayim, L'Shem Shamayim. So when Shimon HaTzadik heard this description from the Nazir Echad Min Adoram, Miyad Amadati Unashaktiv Al Rosho, it's very interesting. Shimon HaTzadik gives him a kiss on his forehead because the word Nazir really etymologically means the forehead. Did you know that? Like it's a crown.
Nazar, yeah, like, yeah.
Correct. Nezer al Rosho always means a crown on his head. So I'm gonna kiss, says Shimon Hatzadik, your crown on your head because your Nezirus is really a reflection of Kedusha, of a sincere desire to overcome the Yetzer Hara. Amarti lo bini, and he adds a bracha and he says, my son, kamochu yirbu nozrei Nezirus b'Yisrael. There should be many Nazirim in Israel like you. So it comes out that there's something called Nezirus Derech Kedusha, which is L'Shem Shamayim, and it's a positive aspect. And the Rambam calls it Noeh Umeshubach, something that's praiseworthy. And Chazal say that there are two parshios in Nasso, which are one next to the other. Does anybody know what is the subject of the parsha right before the Nazir parsha?
Oh,
What do you say?
Sota.
Excellent. Sota. So Sota is a woman who violated her husband's warning. She was not allowed to be alone with a certain man. And we suspect her of adultery. Now, once again, in the context of the Torah and Chazal, if a man wants to seduce a woman, then the best way of doing that is to get her drunk. Because when you're intoxicated, you lose your sense of right and wrong, your moral compass. Everything is confusing. And chas v'shalom, if a man gets a woman drunk, even if she's a married woman, he has her confused. And if he makes advances towards her, she doesn't know how to respond. So in a sense, the cause of the downfall of this sota, to seclude herself with a man, and who knows what happened in seclusion, was the fact that she drank wine. End Parshas Sota, and enter Parshas Nazir. So Nazir looks at the Sota, and perhaps he was present when they administered all the, shall I say, the ceremonious mitzvah that has to be administered to a Sota, in which she's terribly humiliated. I mean, they expose her hair, and then they impose an oath on her, and then they force her to drink something that could kill her. I mean, all this is humiliating. And the Nazir, who's not yet a Nazir, but he's a person, a citizen who's standing on the sidelines, and he's thinking to himself, look what lowliness this woman got to, the lowest level of a sota, and why? Apparently because she was drinking intoxicated beverages. So what did he decide to do? He decided lahazir atzmo min hayayin. So in the case of the Nazir min Adorim and Shimon HaTzadik, he took upon himself Nezirus because he would shave his head. And the beautiful hair that he had with the curls was the temptation of the Yetzer Hara. Here, the temptation of the Yetzer Hara is yayin. So once again, it pays to accept upon yourself Nezirus. And now the Rambam says that the level of this Nazir, who was motivated by the right reasons, because he was afraid of the impact of the Yetzer Hara, is the level of a Navi. He achieves the status similar to that of a Navi. What is unique about a Navi? A Navi is what I call single-mindedness. Does anybody know what I mean by that? You know, when you're focused on one thing and one thing only, to the exclusion of everything else. What is the Nazir focused on?
High level of Kedusha.
He's focused on being ready at any moment to be visited by the Eibishter, to have an experience of Nevuah in which God reveals himself to the Navi. And I'll prove it to you. Chazal tell us that Yosef HaTzadik refused the advances of Eshes Potiphar. Why? Because he felt that as a Navi, Hashem might appear to him at any possible moment. And imagine if Hashem appears to him and finds him having a relationship with this married woman. So the Nazir has to be very careful about every step he takes. Every moment could be potentially a moment of Nevuah. Now, I'm going to ask you a question which I'll be very happily surprised if you know the right answer. But we'll try it. Yeah? You ready for this?
Yeah.
A Jewish woman gives birth to a baby. And there's something called a wet nurse in which she gives commissions another woman to nurse the baby. For whatever reason. There may be 5 different reasons why she did so. Here's the question I want to ask you. Is she allowed to hire a non-Jewish woman as a wet nurse to nurse her baby?
Yes.
The answer is no. She's not allowed to do that unless there's no other choice and the baby chas v'sholom might die. But here's the question that I really want to ask you. How do we know, or how do the Chazal know, that you should not give a Jewish baby over to a non-Jewish nursing wet nurse? You'll never believe it. It's derived from Moshe Rabbeinu. Come on, Rabbi Burson, you're joking with us. You probably drank too much at the banquet last night. What are we saying? Crazy things. The answer is that Miriam, who was watching her younger little baby brother as he was traveling along the Nile in that cradle, when Basya Bas Paro took the baby in, she offered to bring her mother as a wet nurse. Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
And Yocheved came into the palace of Paro in order to nurse little baby Moshe. And Chazal say, why was this so important? Why was it so critical that a Jewish mother be the one to nurse the baby? And Chazal answer, very cryptic answer, Peh she'osid lidaber im hashchina yonik min hatame. A mouth. Whose mouth do you think Chazal are referring to?
Wonders.
The mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu. She'osid lidaber im hashchina. That in the future down the line will be speaking to the Almighty, which is what Nevuah is all about. Yinok min hatame. He should breastfeed from a non-Jewish woman? So let me share with you a question, a fascinating question that was raised by Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky. And I don't know, you may find it, because I think they have a copy of his book on Chumash called Emes Yaakov in the Beis Medrash to your right. Maybe. Don't look now. You won't find it. It's all the way in the back. So Rav Yaakov asks the following question. He says, a Jewish mother is not allowed to give her baby to a non-Jewish wet nurse because of Moshe Rabbeinu? In Yiddish, we say, what's the tzustel? What's the comparison? What's the analogy? Moshe Rabbeinu, Chazal says, pesha osi l'daber mashchina. Rav Yaakov asks, but what about you, me, and every other baby in the Jewish community? That's not pesha osi l'daber mashchina. That's a separate halacha in Moshe Rabbeinu. How can we derive from the unique situation of Moshe Rabbeinu that a Jewish woman is enjoined from hiring a non-Jewish wet nurse? Anybody hear the question?
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you hear the question. Okay, good. So Rav Yaakov says the following. And I just realized that I should share this with the girls in Lev when I speak on Tuesday. Anyway, says Rav Yaakov, when a Jewish mother raises this young little baby, she doesn't have the furthest clue. It's way out of her mind that this baby might be a pesha asid l'daber mashchina. But the halacha sees it otherwise. And the halacha dictates that every single baby in Israel potentially is a pesha asid l'daber mashchina. And you have to allow that baby, every baby in Israel, to reach that goal, that level of a Navi, of Pesha Asil Dar Meshchina. You're not allowed to close the door and make it impossible for that baby to be a Pesha Asil Dar Meshchina. And therefore, hence, you're not allowed to give the baby to suckle from a tummy place. Because in doing so, you make it impossible for it to become a Pesha Asil Dar Meshchina. Every child is like Moshe Rabbeinu. Whether we reach that level or we don't, but we have to have the potential, and the chinuch and the education of child rearing has to reach for the maximum. You can't just say, "Oh, my baby's not going to be a pesha. I can't raise my baby to be a navi. I don't have that on my mindset." No. Let's get back to the case of a nazir. The nazir, says the Rambam, if he accepted upon himself Nezirus for the right reasons, like that Nazir Echad Min Adarom, achieves the level of a Navi. Whenever we strive, reach out for Kedusha, to come closer and closer to the Shekhinah, we are trying to imitate a Navi. A Navi is single-mindedly focused to the exclusion of any other involvement in this world on L'daber Mashchina. The Nazir, if he's motivated L'Shem Shemayim, is also going to be focusing his attention totally on getting close to the Shekhinah, on being a Nezer Kodesh, on having a crown of Kedusha. And in that sense, he's like a Navi. Reb Chaim points out in the next paragraph that there are three different dimensions to a Nazir. Number one, this is the paragraph that starts Vehine. Maybe you want to underline the first of the three at least. Prisha mitanuge ha'olam hazeh. He desists from drinking wine so that he doesn't get too involved in this world. Look, Rabbosai, we're not saying that you can't drink wine, period. That's not what we're trying to say. Wine is a good thing, but only within a certain measure, within a certain context. If you overstep your bounds with an overindulgence in wine, then you may end up like a sota, or you may end up like Lot. You remember the story of Benos Lot. And the word in Yiddish, I don't know, it's very hard for me to translate this word. I'll try to do the best I can. Orangutan. Did you ever hear that?
No.
See, you guys only take an ulpan in Hebrew. You don't take an ulpan in Yiddish.
And the Upan's also optional. Not all of us take the Upan.
Right. So if you, I don't know if any of you are planning to go to YU, but if you are, you could take a minor in Yiddish.
Right, yeah.
So you'll learn about the word orangutan. And it's nothing to do with the apes, but orangutan means to be totally single-mindedly focused on getting drunk, on losing it, on being intoxicated to the point of forgetting about this world, just get drunk, go to the parties, do whatever you have to do there. That's called orangutan. So the first dimension of a Nazir is Prisha. Prisha means to separate yourself from being chas v'shalom orangutan in this world. Number two is you grow your hair long. That's a totally different dimension of the Yetzer Hara. Here, the Yetzer Hara is trying to convince you how beautiful you are. You've got long, curly hair. And now by becoming a Nazir, you're going to have to shave all that hair off. And that's called Giluach or Tiglachas Nazir. According to one of the Tanoim, until the Nazir does his Tiglachas and cuts off his hair, he still remains a Nazir. He can only terminate his Nezirus when he finally cuts off his hair. Vagimel Prisha Mitumas Mes. Now this one is a tough one. I can understand the first two, right? Because by avoiding wine and cutting off his hair, he somehow separates himself from the clutches of the Yetzer Hara. But the third dimension, says Reb Chaim, that he shouldn't come in contact with dead bodies and contract tumas mes. I would have said the opposite is true. Because the Pasuk says in Koheles, Tov lo-leches el beis avel. And the Gemara says in Brachos that if the Yetzer Hara gets a hold of you, you should remind yourself of the day of death. So why is the Nazir in this third dimension enjoined from contaminating himself by contact with a dead body? And to strengthen his question, if you turn to page Shin Yud Daled, you'll see a paragraph that starts Mikol Zeh. It's about the third major paragraph on the page. Everybody have it?
Yeah.
He says, Nira, I come to the conclusion, and again, we're skipping all his proofs. His orus gedol yesh ba'olames. If you go in to an olames, meaning you have contact with a mess, his orus gedola. That's a great way of snapping you out of your being a orangutan in this world and focus on the world to come. I don't understand. Why did the Torah prohibit the Nazir from coming in contact with the dead? So I see Reb Chaim's answer, but I don't understand. Do you see the next paragraph? Ayin bibal haturim.
Yeah.
You have that? I
Yeah.
see the sun is bothering you.
Yeah, a little bit.
I'm really sorry about that.
No worries.
Uh,
Face is getting cooked by it. Oh.
so the Baal Haturim, anybody know who he was?
Maybe he's a Perish or Chumash. I don't know. I forgot
His name was Rabbi Yaakov. His father was the Rush, if you ever heard of the Rush.
Okay.
So
Wait, wasn't the Rush's son also the Rif?
the Rush's son was the Baal Haturim, Rabbi Yaakov. He also wrote a commentary on the Ramban al Torah.
Oh, okay.
But you gentlemen are not in my Ramban class. How would you know that? Okay, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so I'm just joking today. The Baal Haturim says, Shelo Yomru Shu Doresh El HaMesim. It's very interesting. The Nazir, insofar as he is like a spiritual one ahead, one upward on the rest of the people, might be accused of being Doresh al Mason. There's a very fancy English word for that, but I forget what it is. It starts with an N. I forget what it is. Anyway, you could Google it, right?
Narcissistic?
Not exactly. It's a different word. Anyway, they had a way. Again, we don't know how to do it today, but in those days, they could conjure up a dead body and ask him questions and know how to go ahead forward. But we're not allowed to do that.
Necromancy?
Yeah, that's it. Say it again.
Necromancy.
That's the word. So that's called Dorish Alamesa, which is prohibited. So in order to keep the Nazir far away from the dead bodies, so that no one would suspect him of being Dorish Alamesim, the Torah said he's not allowed to go anywhere near a cemetery, anywhere near a dead body. So Reb Chaim says the following. According to Reb Chaim, the basic purpose of the Torah through Nezirus is to keep you away from Olam Hazeh, from the Tanugim and the pleasures of the Yetzer Hara, and therefore stay away from wine, chop off your hair at the end of the Nezirus. The Torah really would have wanted the Nazir to come in contact with the mess. But since there's a chashash, a suspicion, that other people who see him are going to suspect him of being Dorish al Mesim, the Torah therefore says, don't go anywhere near a mess. In other words, although the Nazir wants to achieve a greater level of Kedusha and sanctity, and therefore in that context, we should encourage him to have contact with the dead, but not at the expense of people suspecting him of being Dorish al Mason. Because if they suspect the Nazir, who's on the top of the top in Kedusha and levels of sanctity, of being Dorish al Mason, they may come to want to do it themselves. So in order to avoid such a situation, we're going to say to the Nazir, even though it's good for you, and it would make sense for you to come in contact with the dead, but nevertheless don't do it. Because you have to worry not only about yourself, but also about the impact that could have on others. Okay, I'm going to end the shir with one last thought, one last paragraph. Perhaps the most outstanding biblical personality in the arena of avoiding the Yetzer Hara is none other than Yosef HaTzadik. Because we cannot even imagine what kind of Yetzer Hara was over and over again she's trying to seduce him. Chazal say that at the end of the day, how did Yosef achieve that great goal of standing strong and overcoming the intense, profound temptations of the Yetzer Hara? How did he do it? And Chazal say that he saw in his mind the image of his father Jacob. And as you and I know, he was separated from his father for 22 years. Now, let's be honest with ourselves. You know, he had a little bit of a dream and he saw Yaakov, his father, in his dream. So what? How does that help him against the greatest, most profound temptation in the famous scenario of Ashes Potiphar? Well, once again, I would submit to you that this is not about a dream. It's not that Yaakov Avinu did or did not appear to him in a dream. This is Yosef experiencing himself, getting to know himself. He looks inwardly and asks himself, who am I? And when he realizes that he is the son, the chosen son of Yaakov, of the great Yaakov, he realizes that this kind of action, that this kind of involvement of behavior is below the level that he's achieved. That he has been studying at the feet of his great father Yaakov. Yaakov loved him. Yaakov dressed him with tzonos pasim, and according to the Ramban, Yaakov transmitted to Yosef all the Torah. Torah Shebechsav, Torah Shebal Peh, Kabbalah, Sod, everything. So when Yosef is fighting against the Yetzer Hara, and he's looking into himself, he realizes, why should he jeopardize all that he achieved in his lifetime as the son, the chosen son of Yaakov? And my message to you, gentlemen, is the following. I don't know what your plans are exactly when you're leaving. Some of you may be going to other countries to visit. I don't know. Just be careful today. It's very dangerous. Most of you will probably go to the good old United States of America. But wherever you go, take with you this protection against the Yetzer Hara and constantly talk to yourselves. Look yourselves, so to speak, in the mirror and say, I am a Nazir. I am a Navi. I am a product of intense learning of Torah in an environment of tahara, of purity, with comrades that want to grow and reach higher levels in their closeness to Shammai. As we say in Dayenu, Ilu kervanu hamakom lifnei Har Sinai Dayenu. We didn't learn much yet from Har Sinai. We maybe got a smattering, a taste. But kirvanu hamakom, God brought us closer, and we experienced Har Sinai. And of course, now this past Monday, we experienced Kabbalas HaTorah on the 6th of Sivan. So my blessing to you, and my hope and prayer to you, is that you continue to steig, to go higher and higher, and to take with you that very potent protection against the Yetzer Hara by thinking, by realizing who you are and what great levels you've achieved and will achieve in the future. Ken Yiratzon. Ratzon. Amen.
Thank you so much for a great.
Thank you.